Welcome very much to this panel on the culture track of the Manchester Digital City Festival. This is organised jointly by the School of Digital Arts Manchester, SODA, at Manchester Metropolitan University, and MASSmcr, a research group that looks into the music and sound studies in Manchester. And today's panel, I have a great pleasure to welcome Karen Gabay, DJ Paulette, and Aniff Akinola to our discussion about Manchester's popular music histories and the opportunities that the digitalization of artifacts, tracks, histories, stories provides for us to maybe in the future provide a more broader or more varied history about popular music in Manchester. So to start off, Karen, I would like you to tell me a little bit about yourself and your position in Manchester music history and your current work.
So hello everyone, I am a radio presenter, been a long time radio presenter working at BBC Radio Manchester, Radio 1, 5 Live, Kiss FM. And I'm also a TV producer specialising in pop culture and music. But in recent years, I've been a social historian and archivist, kind of preserving Manchester's histories, Manchester's heritage, Manchester's music histories. I think long before people were talking about unsung heroes and heroines and hidden stories, I decided that that needed to be documented in Manchester. And not an easy road, because as a female, people often wanted to exclude me from the playground, so to speak, of preserving that history and that culture. And I'm currently still doing that and broadening it out, because I'm looking at women in music as well, and talking to a lot of women who have been erased from history. And I continue to work in TV and radio. That's me.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you. Let's move on to DJ Paulette. I don't think she needs a great introduction, but maybe you can tell us a little bit something that we don't know about you, watching your performances, dancing to your tracks.
No, I am known as DJ Paulette, but before I started DJing, I was singing in bands, recording, backing vocal sessions, singing, all of that. So I've been working in music really since I was 18 years old, and I'm now 54, so that's quite a long time in dog years. I've started my DJing career, first of all, at the number one in Manchester, and then I went very quickly from the number one, which was a really cool underground club in Manchester that people really don't talk a lot or enough about. But there you go. I passed from the number one to the Hacienda, where I played as a resident in the second room of the Flesh Party for 4.5 years. And then after that, I moved to London. I was in London for 10 years. I was DJing. I was a press officer for Mercury Records. And I did the press for all of Talking Loud, Def Jam, Manifesto, Fontana, that kind of thing. And then I went to Paris, 10 years, again, DJing, top of my game, worked for 2 big radio stations there, Radio FJ and Virgin. And then I moved to Ibiza and lived there for 2 years and came back to Manchester in 2015. And that's my very potted history.
Thank you very much. Thanks. And Aniff, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm in shock now. Just what Paulette's just told me, something I've just found out, which is like, no way. I'm gonna have to come back.
What did I say?
Working at Talking Loud, we would have been the first. Oh my, right? Okay, we got to talk about that off camera. All right, but my name's Aniff Akinola. I'm a music producer, music facilitator. I can't play a chord. I don't know what chords are. I lived in Manchester since I was 2. Originally from London, crazy enough. And first song I ever remember singing was She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah by the Beatles. And I've kind of produced lots of records, discovered artists, and worked very communal based with people who probably didn't think they had a hit song in them, and then found they have had a hit song in them, and then have gone on to do other things. I work from home. I'm quite political. because Manchester is quite a political city. Okay. We have lots of things to say, and we want to make change for the world, not just our Manchester. So, that's me, Aniff Akinola. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So let's start off. When I contacted you for this panel, I asked you to send me an image or an artifact, an image of an artifact that represents to you part of a Manchester popular music history that you perhaps think has not been commented on enough or has not featured enough in parts of, the kind of very outward, public-facing, dominant Manchester music history that is also used for tourism, for income generation. Karen, I would like to start off by you telling me a little bit about the things that you have brought in.
So my images of Bobby Womack playing at the Manchester Apollo. Now, the reason why I picked that is 2004, you might think it's kind of like more recent, but it's the fact that Bobby Womack's part of Manchester's history. He recorded with Fat City Records, he recorded with Manchester musicians. He had a link, there was other Manchester musicians, producers who got in touch with him at a time when he was kind of off the radar prior to this performance. And why I've just used that as an example is that often a lot of the bands and even the indie bands are really influenced by the likes of the Bobby Womacks coming to Manchester, giving these gigs that a lot of people say, I was there or I remember, I'm a fan of the music, and it's not talked about, it's not discussed, that influence isn't discussed. They still go back to there are certain people who, did a punk gig at the Free Trade Hall, and that's what's impacted on Manchester's music. So even the visitors who engage with Manchester and not talked about, like I've interviewed the Four Tops many times. They've been coming from since the 60s. They're still coming to this present day. Where do they go? They go to Rusholme and have a curry after every gig, which is one of the reasons they come, because they like the people from Manchester. They've played all the little venues as well as the big venues, and they're really intertwined with that culture. Motown had the biggest impact, as much as the Beatles, on people. And again, that relationship's never discussed, but people will talk about other white artists coming and how that's impacted on our culture. And why that's important is it affects the people listening and buying to music, and it affects how Black music is respected. And it also affects how British music is respected, because I say, he's worked, not only just worked with the Gorillas, he's worked with people here in this city. And why aren't people talking about it? It's a part of the erasure, and that's why it might not be what you expect to see up there. But it was, I remember when he came, people couldn't believe that he'd actually turned up in Manchester and he was doing this gig. And, Bobby Womack's written for the Stones. He's written, you'll hear his music on adverts. You'll hear all of those things. It's ingrained into what's come out of this city, and it's not there. So that's why I've picked, Bobby Womack. And I don't know if people realise what his connection to the city was.
Can I say something? Jump in. Karen, there's one song which is, I think, Shafty and Curtis and other was Wouldn't You Break My Heart, which was an absolute endemic part of the I think more children have possibly been conceived during that song in many a time, and you do not realise until it is played what that song means to Manchester. There are certain songs I could go 10 songs which by certain DJs, and Bobby Womack, Wouldn't You Break My Heart. It was crazy because I saw him at the International and he didn't play that song, and the uproar but it was some legal reason why he didn't play that song. So I can completely empathise with Karen's choice of Bobby Womack, and in working with Ray and Christian on. I remember even speaking about it. I couldn't believe that they'd got to work with him. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to say that song, Couldn't You Break That? You've got to have a listen to it. You know what I mean? There's Harry Hippie, and then there's other ones, but it's a Manchester anthem. That song. And I think that's why we have such a passion for Bobby Womack, you know what I mean?
Aniff, do you want to, sorry.
No, I was going to say, and the other thing is that I think, you've worked in other cities, I've worked in, Cardiff, London, and Paulette as well, you might attest to this, is that, you know, Norman J and Jazzy B are great at kind of also championing how certain tracks bring people together and define a certain time. Yeah. And in Manchester, we don't do that as much in terms of the Black music. And also, you know, it goes kind of like wider out there, but that kind of discussion doesn't happen as much. And it's really important to people. If you play that song on the radio, like say, or in the club, everybody's going to say something similar to like what Aniff was saying.
That reminds me of.
But where, you know, this city is not as good as that, because it's like, you know, when I heard the Smiths, that reminds me of.
I think that's a bit why I play the way I do, because when I started DJing, I was playing at Flesh, I was playing all those records, you know, like Bobby Womack, How Could You Break My Heart, all of those like early Philly records and everything. And I like to play the music that brings those memories back of where you were, who you were with, you know, what time of year it was when you went and bought that record at Spinning, or, you know, and who you were with, and, you know, who put it in the bag. You know, it's like but I think I might also get that kind of attitude to music from having been in London and worked with Norman and worked with Giles, and that, like, that's kind of how my music or my sets like that have been shaped, is to bring those old tunes out, always to kind of be dusting them out and play the original, don't play the re-edit. Anyway, diversion. Sorry.
Well, let's go back to Aniff. Aniff, what have you brought?
The image I brought is an image of Tony Wilson, which basically, it affects all three of us in musically and stuff. And the reason why some people might not realise is that they think, oh, the hacienda and such, but it's one because of I actually met Tony Wilson many years before he became a music mogul as an interviewer. He stayed up 2 days with my family interviewing my brother. So my mum was giving him dumplings and stuff, because my brother boxed for England. So I had a recollection of him, and I actually knew where he lived in Longsight. So it's like, oh, the guy on Granada Reports lives there. But then later on in life, I got involved in music, and I've got to know Ewan really well. Ewan ended up driving for a certain ratio, and a lot of these bands, Swamp Children, Kalima, and all these lot were kind of all interfusing one another. And Tony Wilson really liked these, and ACR, Ewan and Tony had this discussion. Now, Ewan remember telling me, oh, with this guy Tony, he told me he's going to have this club, and he says that black music is going to be the mainstay music for the UK nationally in a couple of years. And I'm thinking, you know, and I'm at this time, I'm still listening to Shafty on his little Sunday show, possibly years before grabbing a bit of Radio Luxembourg, Jeff Young on Radio 1. Well, we'll see, you know what I mean? And then he opens up this club, and he promised Ewan that he would have Ewan as his main DJ. So you've got to remember, in Manchester, they had lots of other DJs. You could have picked Radio 1, and he picked a black guy from Ghetto and stuff to open up his club, because he had this vision for what he felt was going to be a driving force for his club. So that was a major thing to me, that it was good to, because sometimes we get these promises and then they don't get delivered. And 2 years on for him, you know, trying to get the money from Hooky and all that, he was good to it, you know, and he was good to it for 3.5 years for me. You know what I mean? The other thing which is never kind of mentioned is the passion. That a major thing. You've got to remember, we had Chief Inspector Anderton, and Manchester was really kind of dodgy then and such. He put a black guy in charge of licensing on a door. Now, I will tell you, there was licenses in the city of Manchester owned by a black person was unknown. I think you had one, possibly Scotty's, you had a club in Manchester at one time, and that was it. So when he had Leroy name, we were, you know, people were like, whoa, Leroy's a licensee, it's his name over the club. It was another kind of moment of kind of, and I could have said not emboldenment and something, but like little pride, because I was, you know, I had a discussion. When we went to the house, it wasn't a club where I feel I wouldn't get in, no matter how I was dressed. I could tell you now, I could go round to Rotters, and it would be, Brad's who is, oh, am I going to possibly get in? Are they going to just be, and the club would be empty, and I still might get an hard time. You know what I mean? So it was kind of, it's a nod to Tony Wilson's under thing of the black music. And the last thing I'll say is, the last act he signed was a group called Raw Tea, a grime group. I can't remember, it was around 1996. He worked with Sefton and Zed Bias on that. And Attilia, who runs Gore Hill School and stuff. So even then, he was still picking, you know, his passion for thingy. Even though it wasn't might be not his central focus, he understood and had a love for it and how it fed into things. So now we've got Stormzy and Dave, grime artists, who are probably two of the UK's biggest artists. So that visionary kind of thing about him was brilliant. And also, lastly, you know, I remember there was a madness that he says, oh, I want to get sidewalk culture, so we open up Dry Bar. And I was like, you're not going to get Manchester people sitting outside on the pavement, mate. It's not happening. Well, I eat my words now. I was wrong. You know what I mean?
I mean, the Hacienda, what is really written out of the history is, of course, you know, one of the owners is a black man. Like you said, the licensee was a black guy. The bands that played... The bands that played with black people aren't saying Ken City played at the Hacienda.
Change.
Himself, you know, there was, you know, I'm sure, you know, there's reggae bands that kind of like played at the Hacienda. Donald Byrd at the Hacienda. You know, found my Colleen Anderson ticket at the Hacienda.
Yeah, Mantronics played.
Mantronics, no one ever discusses it. And I remember before he was famous, Mark Ronson came in to the studios. I went to Southport with him, and he said he sat in his bedroom as a kid and dreamed of playing at the Hacienda. And I said, oh, do you know Run DMC played at the Hacienda? And I was talking about all these things, and he said, why does no one ever talk about that? You know, that's you know, that part of history. He said, no one's ever mentioned to me that that hip hop was at the Hacienda before anywhere else. No one discusses it. It was that's why black people were welcome in that club by Tony Wilson. You were welcome, you know, black barmaids,
totally.
black DJs,
cloakroom, bar, management, you name it.
Sydney.
DJs.
Okay, but before we go a little bit more into discussing the history and the particular ways in which Manchester's popular music
talk about my picture?
Been written, I just wanted to say we still need to ask Paulette for her image before we can move on.
We've got we're running out of time as well. My picture was is a picture of the reception area in Pips in Manchester. And when I started going clubbing, I started going clubbing quite young. And my family were all going to the gallery and the all-nighters and the all-dayers and rafters and you name it. But I also wanted to follow my music as well. So I had shifted and was getting into all the early electronic music, all the music coming out of Sheffield. So I was following Kraftwerk as well. I was following David Bowie. I was following Roxy Music. I was following early Human League, Ultravox, you name it. So I was really into that vibe of music. And Pips in Manchester was the place to go in the 80s, like late 70s, early 80s. Pips in Manchester was the place to go to hear this, but it wasn't just that music. It had 4 rooms. It had a soul room where Hugh and Clark and Mike Shaft started their DJ careers. Both of them started at Pips in Manchester in the soul room, which was in the middle floor. And then he had the Bowie room and the Roxy room, which is where I was mostly, but I also spent time in front of Hugh and Clark and Mike Shaft at Pips. And people do not talk about Pips. For some reason, when people talk about Manchester and clubbing and black music and any music at all, they only have one gear, which is the Hacienda. There were a ton of other clubs in Manchester other than the Hacienda. There was Rafters, there was Legends, there was Berlin, there was Deville's, and there was Pips in Manchester. And that's where I started going clubbing, and that's where the picture is from.
Yeah, right. Sade didn't play at Hacienda, did she? She played in '82 elsewhere, so I think it was Rafters or Placemate, I think.
Yeah.
Right. You've mentioned quite a few places and quite a few names, and I'm starting to get the sense that there, in a way, two things have happened. On the one hand, it feels like there's almost a separate kind of music history going on. That Karen called is like Black people being written out of history. So there's a focus on on anything not Black, perhaps, or a focus on a particular style or genre, or does it have to do with the people who are documenting and commenting on that history? And on the other, sorry, yeah, go on.
I think it's a mixture of both. I think it's a mixture of everything, because first of all, when you think about the past, it's very easy to think about the past with the eyes of the present. So we'll talk about the 80s, but think about the availability of information from where we are now, and the amount of magazines and the amount of online accessibility to the information. Whereas in the 80s, you only had a certain amount of radio stations. You only had a very small amount of specialist radio shows that would be talking about whatever the events were and talking about whoever the artists were. But then also the magazines, as we know, magazines have a bias, and it was hard to get Black music in any press at all. And in terms of the local press, you could to get a feature on a Black artist in the evening news was a mission. It still probably is, but back then it was 10 times harder. You didn't see those articles in the newspaper. So that is a point in, a case in point, first of all, is that the editorial wasn't covering it. The editorial wasn't really covering the Black music nights. The editorial, even, when you think about how Manchester came, they covered that. They didn't cover anything else. You wouldn't have thought that there was any other music coming out of Manchester at that time. So I think the press has a lot to do with it.
Can I kind of coming off what Paulette says, truthfully, the internet was then word of mouth, or if you was in the Arndale, someone told you about something, you know what I mean? Because even the press didn't pick up on things. So you got to also remember the club life was Saturday night, Friday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That wasn't Black music nights in Manchester. They were very rare, though, because, there's all of the economy. The Black people didn't drink much, so the club owners they weren't going to sell enough beer, sort of thing. So it was from possibly Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, sometimes Thursday, and you can plot the actual massive club nights, from there. The clubs that Paulette says, I went to Pips, I'd go to the Little Showroom, I'd go to Placemate 7, what I mean? The little, some of they had their kind of their Bowie rooms and their electro rooms as well, Deville's. And I think, even from the, machination of different clubs opening at Rafters, the jazz defectors getting their name because they were leaving a jazz club and defecting to the Hacienda, wearing all the, antique market clothes and stuff that were being bought because, it was kind of a new venue. So this kind of, the reality of, one of my biggest regrets in life was I used to go to a club called Smarties, which was Saturday night, which would play a bit of disco and stuff. That was next door to Spinning. Me not knowing that on the Sunday night there was a club running for 2 years called Rafters. So I missed from 1979 to late 81 of all these nights running, and there were people who I knew, and it's amazing. Why was I not told about this? I remember the night Ewan walked into Rafters, and it was funny because I saw his face. It was like, oh my God, you know what I mean? And I remember how I felt when I first came there, and Ewan was late, you know what I mean, to Rafters. And he, you know, I remember him walking in and he was just like, why did I not know about this? And he was a DJ, you know, you know, so those communication things ongoing, you know what I mean? If they were broken, you sometimes didn't get to know about them. And if you weren't moving in the right posse, you didn't get to know about them and stuff like that. So they existed. It did exist as a kind of a subculture and stuff. And even to us who were in it, sometimes there was bits that we missed out on, or were a bit fragmented as well. You know what I mean?
Oh, well, we didn't have phones. We didn't have.
We didn't have cameras.
I mean, didn't have cameras.
We didn't have cameras. I mean, it's the whole thing about the Black Irish community in particular, say that they didn't have cameras. And also, sometimes if you did capture something, you weren't happy that, you know, when I've done the research, you looked as smart as other people. So people have ripped photographs up.
Yeah.
I think there's part, you know, it's a big thing. I think the other thing is
cut boyfriends off them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, not keeping things, you know, I've got
no ticket stubs.
Ticket stubs is kind of one thing. But I have to say there's a big element of why things will be problematic to be moved on digitally. It will have to be a lot of it oral, which is fine. That's part of the Black culture anyway. But there's a big thing which is often talked about within, you know, the Black diaspora, you know, of Manchester. It's still, people want to talk about R&B, reggae. So a lot of us grew up listening to John Peel. We are, you know, we're quite, you know, we did not just listen to soul or Motown.
Exactly. We listen to everything.
Listen to everything. And, you know, and some of the elders through reggae will say they listen to everything. So because of that, and us having a wider taste, people don't want to talk about it. You know, people know me as a big Prince fan. I was a one-off because we're like, it's rock music. You're weird. We don't want to. We don't want to talk about that. You don't discuss it. You know, you don't discuss that you like the Bunnymen. You don't discuss that you like those things. That means that Barry Adamson's not talked about very much. I didn't know for years that there was a Black punk legend living in Manchester. That's not discussed about. Beverly McDonald, part of the Quango 52nd Street, who I knew, guitar playing, singing female, not talked about. The gospel musicians who went into dance, Ruth McFarland, not talked about, because people still now go, I want to talk about hip hop. I want to talk about soul. And I know that's not documented, but gospel led to Simply Red forming. You know, that's the foundation of Simply Red. You know, the foundation, PWL was in Manchester. All those Black singers that sang with PWL, not discussed. Wayne Marshall, no, he's not a reggae singer. He's part of the Bridgewater Hall, classical musician. You know, there's all of those elements. Again, that because of what we, even as Black people, want to discuss, there's that element of saying you've got to widen it, because it's, you know, the tastes are wider, and you don't exclude, because we've been excluded from the argument. Don't say you don't want to hear what happens in terms of the classical foundations or other people's training. I think that's also part of the move. If we go digital, that it's not just about hip hop histories.
It's everything.
It's everything.
Can I actually follow on from this? Because Karen, you mentioned something that I found in my own research. I haven't introduced myself, by the way, but I do research Manchester music histories, and I also happen to interview a few people for various projects that I'm involved in, and I found something similar to something that you mentioned, Karen, and it's come out in all of your contributions so far, and it feels like there's almost a culture clash. So I'm a white person, and being academically trained, there are particular methods that I feel very comfortable with, kind of documenting, you know, the kind of history in Manchester, the popular music history. And Karen, you just mentioned it has to be oral because there's a different culture going on. What I personally found in interviews is that there are people who are used to being interviewed, and they're very comfortable being interviewed. But there are also people who are maybe not used to that so much. And it's almost like they're too humble to blow their own trumpet when you talk to them. So you know, is that also something that you find thinking about? What do we do different from now on? How could we change that? Paulette, you look.
I think it's about, I'm busting to answer that one, because part of it is almost like in the DNA of Manchester people that you don't big up yourself. It's considered either rude or gauche, or you're above yourself, or, you know, for whatever reason. Manchester people have real difficulty divulging anything beyond today, you know, like going into achievements and discoveries and connections and things like that. It just really isn't a Manchester thing. Almost every DJ that I know has difficulty, or they don't have biogs online, and record labels don't have, you know, they don't put biogs online. They've got a website and you can buy the music, but they don't have any information backing it up, and it's just simple.
But it's deeper than that, I think, in terms of the research, because and you know what you're saying is what Aniff and I've talked about. It's deeper than that, because people who aren't who were DJs back in the day, sound system DJs, for instance, or people who have got stories, what happens is, like when you make TV programs, or when I've worked with academics, and when I started to do this work, I married up with academics, and they're like, well, we do all histories in one way. You just let people talk. Well, not, but also not in terms of if you're really telling this unsung story, you have to interject, because there are things that, like, say, because people will leave out. The other side of it is an example of a documentary I was doing last year for BBC. I knew that the stories around Bob Marley were all very similar, corroborated. Bob Marley playing at Bellevue, how people got into the gig, what he did after the gig, the same as in London, you know. But then I've been asked, but how do you know if it's true? I went, because someone's written in a book doesn't make it true.
Yeah.
Because someone's decided I'm going to do the official biography of Bob Marley, that doesn't make it true. I said, but if you interview 10 people and they all corroborate it, then why are you disputing it? You know, if that's the way that you have to go, if that's what you want to have to confirm it. And that's the issue, because I think sometimes as well, I know I've interviewed people through the years, they can be unknown, they can be the most famous Black person on the planet. And when it gets to editing that programme, it's binned, because they're not, because it's like, oh, how are we saying that? Did you something on Madonna? And every DJ or every person that came across her said the same thing. Essentially, she's a magpie, right? I just give it that way. But then all these people are like, but how do we know it's true? And I said, but we've been all around New York. Everybody, from the dance teacher to whoever, has given a similar story. It's not disparaging, but it's not. But you want to go with the person who's written something in a book, and that's why I'm saying, you know, a lot of Black people haven't written a book. Has Aniff written a book? Has Paulette written a book? Have I written a book?
And you're right, because the people that write the books as well, they have an agenda. This is the agenda that you're talking about. So, you know, they will include so much of it, but then they'll only tell a very small part of the story. They won't go into into the Black side of the story, or they won't go deep enough into it. You know, you'll get like a paragraph here and a footnote there, and then the rest of the book, the entirety of the book, will be about, you know, the bigger story surrounding it, but it just gets left out. It gets left out, or the people don't get questioned deeply enough, or, you know, where's
there a photo to match that? Well, I've got photos because I didn't have a camera. You know, it's that kind of thing. I haven't got a photo. I can tell you that it's like, you know, the one night in Miami they've done about Sam Cooke, Muhammad Ali, Jim Brown all being in the same place. No photo, but it happened. So tell the story, dramatise the story.
Can I add kind of another deeper level to something that both Paulette and Karen have picked up on as being Mancunians? I think also culture within the UK as Black people to stand up and champion. So it's basically is you're putting your head above the parapet, you know what I mean? And you can fear, well, who do they think they are? You know, because there are people in this industry still who will say getting above the station in such and such, you know what I mean? Whereby we know we've got kids coming out of private schools and such who haven't got a clue, who have been mentalised with that confidence to think that there is a certain entitlement, you know what I mean? So I think we do have a double whammy on this. One being Mancunians to play it down, and then being black Mancunians to play it down another level as well. You know what I mean? So I think
we've got triple whammy because on top of it, we've also got because we also can't often tell our black friends or peers what we do, because it's like you're bragging, and then you get the other side of it. You get the other side of it.
You're a woman, I'm gay. It's like just keep labeling it on. You just get lost under levels of stuff people don't want to talk about.
I'm gonna just say, years ago I interviewed Finley Quay, characters everyone knows who recorded that album in Manchester, and I told him, I said, you know what, I'm just going to go and try and do something with the archive and take it beyond broadcast. You know, and I've kept my magazines, I've kept things. And I said, you know, and there are some images. And he said to me, to be really careful, you know. And I said, why? And he said, because people aren't going to make your life easy wanting to do that. And I was really kind of looked at him really puzzled. But now I do know what he means, you know. Also in trying to document the archive, you know, the amount of people who've tried to rip it off, what I've done, you know, and I went to people and said, do you want to do it? But even on that level, I still want to take in on that story. It's like, there are so many other stories. Go and do, you know, go and forge your own path if you suddenly decide it's a good thing to do, you know, and there's that element of it. The amount of calls I get from blokes asking me what I'm up to, just going to put it out there. And then saying they want to include it, and then they heard like down the road that there's a group of blokes all sat cooking the history of Manchester together without asking any women. No, it's true, you know. Or like you know it's true. And that,
I do know it's true.
It's not a bitterness, it's just a fact.
No, it's just the reality. This is the reality of it. And as harsh as it is to say it, it's real. And because it's real, then we have to make extra effort at every opportunity to kind of try and undo it.
Sorry to butt in.
We've got 6 minutes.
Yeah, we've got a little time left, and I would like to spend the last few minutes exploring maybe how digital could help. So in my very naive head, I have this image of, you know, during lockdown when, you know, people are still trying to figure out how streaming could make money for artists, how kind of joining events, you know, all of this. And I'm not the right person to talk about this, but in my head, I had, at least for, you know, kind of the past year, everybody was able to join everything. So in a way, it's almost, as I said, you know, I'm very naive and optimistic. It's like, is this the beginning of maybe using digital in a way to open up opportunities for people to attend events that they otherwise wouldn't have attended, to advertise in a way that we wouldn't have advertised before, to promote, to market, to also perform or participate in a way that makes it easier in terms of access, but also easier in terms of kind of getting cross-cultural connections set up? Or am I too optimistic here? Is that blue skies thinking that is still 50 years off?
Can I jump in straight here? Yes,
yeah, sorry. Please.
I think a lot of people have forgotten about another Manchester first, Hitman and Her, which was digital streaming of disco on a Saturday night into your house. And number of black people who are in different clubs and DJs who got a little shine as well. You know what I mean? So all those things that you said, Beate, were bolted on. You had advertising, you had records being promoted, which wouldn't have got the promotion they had even on the radio. So you had house music, you know, if it's Farley Jack Master Funk or something, this is Alias, Follow You, you know what I mean, and stuff. All these different tracks were played on a Saturday night, and some of them were brand new in the record shop Friday, played on a Saturday with Michaela and Pete Waterman and stuff, and then all the dancers. So you had a kind of a Manchester first, again, a Northwest first, of a platform that fed to many people kind of live music, which was, it was primarily black music. And you had Take That. I remember hearing a story that Take That were 3 weeks away from being dropped, and they did the Hitman and Her in the Chaps, and then all hell broke loose. You know what I mean? It was everyone, you know what I mean, and stuff, and Jason Orange and such and such, I think. And they'd been on there a couple of times, and it hadn't happened, and then it did. So, in terms of launching careers and kind of a lot of the things that we hope for digital to do for us today, that was kind of doing in a early guise back in the day. Yes, I think all those things are going to be possible for us. Taking command of, you know, how we use the digital platform today and what content we're going to want to put up on there. I think it's going to be a bit weird, because I sometimes think, you know, is it more youth orientated that they have? Because when I work with young artists, they have a thing of I kind of say you have to be 18 and naive, and you don't give a damn about what other people think, because if you did, you might not do it and stuff. So yeah, I think it is a new frontier that will open up many. You know, we can talk to anyone in America. We see the Versus things and all sorts, and DJs coming together. So I really do think all possibilities are there. But I wanted to put the Hitman and Her back in there, because it was something I actually did really like to watch, you know, and stuff, because I just like seeing, you know, I can't remember his name with his blonde wig. But yeah.
I think, you know, for the streaming thing, you said that, and if you said that you thought maybe it was a bit younger, but I think that in itself is the point. I think the older people have to get their content online, whether they're going to do a personal blog of their clubbing experiences with whatever pictures they've got, or however they want to write it, or even, you know, maybe do it as a podcast, put it on Mixcloud. You know, not everybody's good at writing, but you can have a free Mixcloud page, and you can put spoken word on there. So, you know, there's a possibility for that digital platform to open up and enable, you know, even someone like my mum to talk about, you know, make a page and talk about her experiences of starting the Ebony Club in Manchester, you know, and you know, doing things like that. So in that respect, maybe those social media platforms would encourage people to get the histories online, but it takes effort. You've got to want to do it.
Yeah, drive. Yeah,
big job. It's a big job, Karen. You're doing it yourself. It's a big job. It's time consuming, and it's unpaid. So, you know, with that decision, really, it either you get someone to back it and pay you to do it, so that you don't mind how many hours it takes to get to assimilate, you know, to accrue all the information from all the corners of the city, and then sift through it and figure out what's important and what you want to post up there or not, or you do it as a labor of love, and it takes ages and you can't get any help. So that is the thing about putting the histories online. It takes time, it takes manpower, and it takes dedication, and you need backing.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, people say that they want to do it, and then they do quickly kind of lose the impetus, because it really does take a lot. And also I think that what lockdown has allowed is, I think there are more women being asked to go online and share. There are more Black musicians who are being uncovered, you know, and being asked to share. But the other side of it, which is, I think, is lost a bit, because the nostalgia things worked during lockdown. United we stream here, and there's like, and he says, Versus getting us all in wherever we are. is that people are decluttering a lot of the times or going through the memories, but
yes,
they're binning them.
true,
And people don't actually realise that if you've got a ticket that says that you saw Tina Turner in Stockport in the 60s, whatever, no, don't throw it in the bin. You can give it to an archive or even snapshot it, you know, or pass it to like somebody else that you know that kind of like wants to do something with it. And I think that's, you know, people decluttering and are throwing away memories, throwing away those important things.
There is an archive already, Manchester Digital Music Archive, and you can personally, everybody can get a page on there. You can just start your page or account on there and upload, scan in, upload whatever ticket stubs you have. You can also do it orally. There's a page where you can leave an oral history about your memories of clubs and places and gigs and things. So it is there in existence, but there needs to be that for Black music, I think.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. We have to finish here, unfortunately. It's been great. It's been great having you all together in one virtual room. Thanks very much for making the time. Thanks very much for, you know, sharing your stories, your opinions. I found it, you know, interesting for my own practice, for my own research. You know, I will go away and think about what I'm doing next. So thanks very much.
A pleasure.
Karen,
thank you.
Paulette,
Thank you.
And Aniff. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Lovely meeting you all.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Yeah,
Bye.
bye.